your Athena course BRM. And this is going to be the third knowledge clip that I'm going to be making for you guys to kind of help you with your finishing up basically your group research project. So here I have the conclusion/discussion section of your project, which is going to be finishing up your research. And basically it's supposed to be the end of after you found all your results, shown your literature, how you actually did the study, all of that stuff. So let's just get started. With these bullet points, these are just basically taken straight from your description that you have for the project. So you have the summary of your findings, comparing the results of your analysis to previous literature, discussing the implications of your current findings for the theory, implications for practice, limitations, and then suggestions for future research. So you have a word count of 750 words. So what I would kind of recommend doing is basically splitting up all of these bullet points into like subtopics. So one way that you could approach it is taking the summary of your findings and also comparing your results to analysis of previous literature and having that be its own paragraph and saying, okay, this is going to be basically our findings, and then like how you compare it to the literature, and you could make that 250 words, roughly. And then for this part, you can say, well, since these are both talking about implications, then you could say that this is about like implications, and then you can also make this 250 words. So this is just one way that you can approach this. You can definitely split it up any way that you would like, but I definitely recommend not having this just be one giant block of text because that's going to be very hard to read. So make sure that you have basically some sort of separation and transition between all of the concepts that they're asking you to address in the conclusion/discussion. So when you're doing a summary of your findings, make sure that you mainly address your hypotheses. I know that in the results section, you can actually, go more deeply into, your correlation matrix, the regression table, and the ANCOVA. But in this case, the summary of your findings should basically just be whether your hypotheses were supported or not. Make sure to address whether one was not supported, which ones were supported, and then you need to compare those results to previous literature. And you've kind of already done this step in your literature review, which you had to have prepared before you actually started analyzing your data. And so based on this previous literature, you can use those past studies. Say, for example, if you found in your data that in your regression analysis, you found that conscientiousness was related to job performance, and you found that to be significant. So therefore, you can support that specific hypothesis from the beginning of your research, and then now say, well, based on past studies which have also found the same thing, we now, in our study, found a similar result to those previous authors or previous researchers. So you can basically kind of do that with the findings that you found, the findings that you found, and then compare it and contrast it to previous literature. So maybe you found that one of the effects was not significant, but other authors in the past or other researchers in the past have found it to be significant. So you can kind of analyze that and say, well, why did we not find this, or why did we find this when someone else in the past did not? And then for the implications of your current findings for the theory, they kind of gave you a bit of two examples. So if, again, you find that hypothesis 2 is confirmed by results, then you kind of can explain your reasoning why you would think that this is an important predictor of job performance, for example. And so in this case, you kind of just say how your findings can basically contribute to the existing theory on what can really predict job performance. And so it's kind of piggybacking off of just comparing your results to the previous literature, but actually showing what it's really adding to the discussion. And then from there, you can easily transition into implications for practice. And what implications for practice means is basically suggestions for organizations. So if you found support for your H2, for example, your hypotheses 2, then you can, in this section, say, well, EI training was effective. Well, that's what we saw, that it was, if you found a significant effect of EI training on job performance post-intervention, then that means that you found support for H2, and you could say, well, if we found that EI training was seemed to have a strong effect on job performance, then we recommend for businesses to implement that or something like that. So you can basically say what businesses should maybe focus on in their practice so that they can basically optimize the performance of their employees. And then from there, now you need to go into the limitations. Of course, all research does have its limits, and I really urge you guys to not just stick to the very basic limitations. Anyone can say that they should have a bigger sample size, and it's a little bit redundant in terms of research. Unless your sample size was very small, usually that's not something that you use as the main argument as a limitation for your research. You could use a lot of things, such as like maybe how you actually conducted the studies. Maybe there's some things in your methods that you would like to critique now. Things like that, where any sort of limitation, you can put it here. Of course, make sure that when you state your limitations, you also can state how you potentially addressed them or how you tried to mitigate them in your research. But again, all research is going to have its limits, and you need to make sure that you're specific and also a bit creative maybe with the limitations. You don't just want to say, oh, we should have a bigger sample size, or we should have run more tests or something like that. Like, try to be specific and also stick to your research specifically. Try to be as concise whenever you're talking about the limitations. And then finally, suggestions for future research. So again, suggestions for future research, do not be basic about this and just say, oh, well, we suggest for researchers to run this exact same study again, just with more people in it. That's not really going to help you at all. Try to be really creative about what you're thinking about for future research. And a good tip that you guys should use is looking at the literature that you have used in your literature review and in your compare results. And in those articles, usually in their discussion and or conclusion, if there are different sections for a lot of articles they are, but if you look at their conclusion or the end of their discussion, usually they say what they recommend themselves for future studies. And so you can kind of use some of those ideas and make it more applicable in terms of what you research specifically. So, of course, in terms of EI training, there's not that much literature about the effects specifically of EI training on job performance. So maybe you could take that and use it and go at it from a different angle. And again, try to be specific in what you would yourself as a researcher like to see in the future. And also it's important to basically say, well, again, our research was mainly doing this, but what would you wish you could have done either better, or what else would you have liked to test? Anything like that. Like, really try to be creative with your suggestions for future researchers. Honestly, like, there's a lot of different options, but again, please do not just say, oh, same study but more samples, or same study but better measurements. Like, those types of things of, like, no duh. Every single time we want to have research, we want to have the best measurements or the most people. Like, that type of stuff is always a given. Try to bring something new, basically. And again, remember that this is 750 words, so try to be as concise in all of this as possible, and don't waste word count just trying to sound fancy. Like, really make sure that you answer all these questions, get really to the point, very clear, concise, and make sure that you split it up into multiple paragraphs so that it's not one giant block of text, all of your discussion, because again, that's going to be really difficult for your tutor to read. So if you guys have any questions about the conclusion/discussion section, just feel free to message me. But again, I really hope that this video was helpful. And yeah, good luck, you guys, with your research assignments.